Hello again, internet friends, and welcome back to another episode of My Little Pony. This week I have some unfortunate news. While I was benching on Saturday, I ran into a little bit of a pec strain. For those of you who have been watching my other videos or have been following me, you know that my goal by the end of the year was to bench 315 and run 15 miles on the same day before the end of the year. So it is extremely frustrating to have this roadblock, and it's going to push my goal back as far as the schedule, but my goal is still going to remain the same, and hopefully I will be able to reach that goal maybe sometime in February or March. And so even though this has been a very frustrating, demoralizing, and upsetting little roadblock, I want to share with you guys why I think I had the pec strain, what caused it, how I'm going to approach it going forward, and just some things that you can do to help you get through injuries and aches and pains and things like that in general. The first question, why did I get hurt? As with any injury, we can never say with 100% certainty what caused it, at least most of the time, but I am pretty confident that it was just a case of me lifting too heavy too many weeks in a row. My heavy single that I was doing before my working sets had been around 275 to 85, and that was fine. That was sustainable. I think that's something I could have done. Maybe could have gone a little bit lighter on, but generally I think that weight was okay. But I was doing that repeatedly and adding weight for about 5 to 6 weeks, and I think that was just too long. As a general rule, I like to tell people don't lift heavy, especially if you're pushing it really hard, for more than 5 weeks in a row on the same exercise without some type of deload or pivot to allow your body to recover from the stress and fatigue of lifting that heavy, because fatigue does not just accumulate in a training session, it accumulates over a course of weeks and even months depending on what you're doing. And so if I had strategized a little bit better and more strategically placed a deload week, then I could have potentially prevented this. But I got excited and I didn't make the responsible decision that I knew I should have made, and so now I'm suffering the consequences of it. And the next question, how am I going to deal with this going forward? Fortunately, this was not a huge, life-altering injury. It's not a pec tear, it's just a strain. It's relatively mild. I strained it on Saturday, and I believe on Monday I did 3 sets of 10 push-ups from my knees. That did feel very uncomfortable and very sensitive and very tight, but it is now Wednesday and my shoulder feels significantly better. I did a back workout yesterday and did some overhead pressing that was relatively light, so I'm still getting in that pressing motion but not doing anything that's really challenging the pec in any way. And so a combination of those two things has helped just keeping the area moving, making sure that I'm not staying stagnant and just sitting with my arm glued to my side all day, and also just doing something that was manageable, those push-ups from the knees. And my pec and shoulder definitely still feel sensitive, but it's significantly better than it was on Saturday, and so that's a very good sign that this is not going to be, something that takes months or years to come back from. It's not a catastrophic injury. It's just kind of a temporary bump in the road, a mild strain that I can come back from. And so my plan, either Friday or Saturday, is to do some type of bench pressing. Hopefully I'll be able to do the bar comfortably. We'll kind of just see how I feel, and I'll have to report back on how the next couple of weeks go at some point. But instead of trying to kind of avoid the injury and work around it, I'm going to find something that lowers the barrier to entry as far as exercise selection goes, so that I can directly address that area where the strain was. And so I'm going to be doing bench pressing, although it's extremely light, and I'll most likely be doing some pec flies with 5-pound dumbbells, or maybe even just the weight of my own arm. And I'm doing that so that I can start working the area that had the problem and getting it strong again and desensitizing it to that sensitivity, because one of the things that happened when you get an injury is there's a lot of sensitivity and there's a lot of apprehension and fear around it because you don't want to make it worse. But depending upon your case, a lot of times when you have a mild strain like the one I had, you only need anywhere from a couple of days to maybe a week or two at the most before to allow that area to recover sufficiently enough for you to start to do something. That doesn't mean that you go back and start lifting heavy again, but you start going through that movement pattern or that training modality that you want to get back to. Because very often, if we just let that area that got hurt sit, it recovers, and now we're just sitting doing nothing when we could be rehabbing, we could be getting that area stronger. And very often, because that sensitivity is there in our minds and we feel sensitive about that area and there's maybe a little bit of pain, that can sometimes get worse when we allow it to just sit and do nothing with it, because we wake up in the morning, it feels stiff, we maybe try and do something that we normally do, we reach for something in a certain way or try and pick something up a certain way, and then it kind of hurts a little bit again, and now you kind of get into the snowball effect of taking time off because it feels sensitive and it hurts, but it's continuing to feel sensitive and hurt because you're taking too much time off. And so for you guys who have these mild strains, once you've, and again, injury is highly individual. You might have something that requires a significant amount of time off, but if you are lifting and boom, you feel a little pop and there's some pain and sensitivity, but then a day or two later, it's like, okay, it's stiff, it's sore, it feels okay, then that's probably a sign that you can try and do something with it. And so anyway, my training will not really change that much. I'm still going to be bench pressing, although it's significantly less weight. I'm not trying to go heavy or anything like that. I'm just going through the motions with the bar, seeing how that feels, seeing if I need to stay there. Maybe I can add weight in the next week, that sort of thing. And I'm also trying to lean into the injury a little bit and say, hey, well, my pec strained, and I haven't, although I think the bench pressing was the primary, I think the bench pressing was the primary cause of the strain. Maybe it would have helped if I had done some more direct pec work, because I cannot remember the last time I did pec flies. I always do push-ups and dips and bench. I cannot remember the last time I did pec flies. It might have been high school. And so not only am I going to use very, very light pec flies as kind of a rehab tool to help get that area strong and feeling good again, but I'm also shoring up a weakness that might not only add to my bench press, but help me, prevent strains and sensitivity in the future, potentially. So although this is very upsetting, very demoralizing, I'm still angry about it, and I definitely want to quit and just not do anything. I am going to continue to be consistent and do what I can in the way that I can, and the goal has not changed. The goal is still the same: 315 bench, 15-mile run. The timeline has simply moved back a little bit, and I'm hoping to be kind of close to where I was right before the strain, maybe in February or March. We'll just kind of have to see what happens. This isn't the type of thing you want to rush. So I know it can feel like I repeat the same 3 to 5 things over and over again in the videos and the posts that I make. And this is probably especially true for those of you guys who have worked with me in the past or are currently working with me. It can seem like I'm just repeating myself every week, week after week. Don't lift too heavy too often. Don't go to failure on your main lifts. Leave 2 to 3 reps in the tank on your squat, bench, deadlift. That sort of thing that you've probably heard from me before. The reason that I push these ideas so hard is because I lifted for many years not knowing basic training principles and not having these rules in place, and I injured myself many, many times and wasted a lot of my time. I don't know if it was a waste because I learned, over time why I was having the problems I was, but ultimately I spent a lot of time being injured and having to come back from injuries when I could have just been getting stronger and becoming better as an athlete. And so when I push these lessons over and over again, it's because I kind of paid the price for not obeying those lessons. And, even in this instance, I get a little excited and I'm not patient enough and I pay the price again. And so I don't want to give anybody the impression that I'm saying don't lift heavy or you're going to get injured. I don't want to instill fear in anybody. But if we can keep a long-term perspective and kind of put aside the short-term gratification of trying to lift as heavy as I can this week, or I'm just going to add a couple more pounds, just doing things that probably aren't that great, and you can keep that long-term goal and that long-term picture in mind and say, hey, you know what? Last week I did 200 pounds. I probably shouldn't try 250 pounds this week. Let's just do 205. If you can keep that ego in check and be patient and keep the long term in mind and try and implement these lessons that I talk about all the time as best you can, I really think that's going to make a difference in your long-term health and performance. And ultimately, that's what I want to help a lot of you guys do, is learn from my mistakes. So take some of the things I say into consideration, try and apply them to your training so that you can be as strong and as capable and as healthy as possible. So stay tuned, guys. Even though this has been a frustrating setback, the goal is still the same. I'm still aiming for the same thing: 315 bench, 15-mile run on the same day. Like, subscribe, join me on my journey to that goal, and I will talk to you guys later.